Hey guys, I'm Dimension Jumper and today I'm doing my top 5 bosses or 2D Zelda bosses that could appear in a future 3D Zelda game. Now, bosses in the Zelda series are quite interesting because each boss gives a unique challenge, whether that's finding out their weakness, using the dungeon items in the particular area, in a particular dungeon that you're in to help fight the boss, and just figuring out just the attack patterns, that sort of thing. So yeah, and within the 2D Zelda games, there are a lot of bosses that I feel like are a bit, or have should probably be brought into a possible future 3D Zelda game, and being given a few tweaks here and there when it comes to probably the boss fights, or be kept the same but in a 3D setting, that sort of thing. So yeah. So for number 5 is Moldorm. Now, you're probably thinking why Moldorm and why he should be brought into a 3D game. And I feel like he should definitely be brought into a 3D game. I personally feel like he should get a bit of an update-ish. Not a huge amount, just a small-ish update. So, because he's only appeared in a few Zelda games, not a huge amount. I think two of the well-known examples is probably A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. And I feel like if it's like a big 3D Zelda game, Moldorm should probably go down the Goma route in terms of boss fights, in terms of how it's done, because in a lot of Goma's boss fights, like mainly Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, Goma can spawn infinite small spiders, and I feel like Moldorm should go down a similar route, in the sense that he'll try and summon small versions of himself and try and like make the boss arena a bit more chaotic and stuff like that. And yeah, I think Moldorm should try and like cover up his weakness on the tail, because his weakness is mainly on the tail, and he does kind of try and guard it, not in terms of like Koloktos or anything, but in terms of like he just moves about all chaotically around the boss arena, and it can be a bit annoying when you have to really fall down into like the floor below you and have to go all the way back up just to fight Moldorm again, and especially in A Link Between Worlds, when you do like a certain amount of damage, he'll like just bring his entire body in and then do a spin a couple of times and then just go in another direction, that sort of thing. So he could try and do something like that if he is brought into a new 3D game. But yeah, I could see him being in a big 3D Zelda game and having some updates here and there to his boss fights. So yeah. For number 4 is Manhandler. Now, Manhandler is this giant, multi-headed piranha plant boss, and it can move about. When you encounter it, it can move about the boss arena randomly, similar to Moldorm, but it's got multiple Deku Bubbers for heads. And it did get kind of brought into modern a game, but it was like more of a spin-off, that being Hyrule Warriors. And that's more of a spin-off, not a proper mainline Zelda game. So I feel like if we did have Manhandler back in a 3D Zelda game, it could go similar to how Manhandler was treated in Hyrule Warriors, in that it can bring out all of its heads and do different type of attacks. So you could have like one head that can use its jaws to try and attack you, one that can spit out seeds, one that can spit out poison, and one that can summon other Deku Bubbers. And that'll be, if it goes something like that, that'll be something quite cool to see, and seeing how updated Manhandler is, because the Deku Bubbers have sort of gone through several changes here and there throughout the Zelda games, because I think, for me personally, one of the I think coolest parts of a Deku Bubba, or one of the coolest designs, are the ones from Skyward Sword, because you've got 3 types of Deku Bubbas, 2 blue, 1 yellow, but the 2 blue ones depend on which way you have to defeat them. So you've got a Deku Bubba that has a mouth that is just a regular mouth, and then you've got another one, but it's on its side, and to like do it either horizontally or vertically. And the yellow Deku Barber is basically a combination of those two Deku Barbers, and with Manhandler, it could go something similar to that when it comes to one of the heads when it summons other Deku Barbers. So we could have like one that has like a normal face, one with that can like do multiple styles, that sort of thing, and yeah, and there'd be something quite cool to see, and just seeing how ginormous this boss can be, because in the first Zelda game, which I believe it appears in, it's just this. It feels giant, but when you compare it to the Manhandler in Hyrule Warriors, it does feel a bit small in comparison. And I do hope if we do see a 3D version of Manhandler, it's this. I hope this is this giant just plant that's just making a huge frenzy in the dungeon that it appears in. So yeah, for number 3 is Psylocke. Now this boss is the second boss in the in Phantom Hourglass, and it's basically this giant Octorok, but it's on a cyclone, and I think, even though its design is simple, it's basically just a giant version of a regular enemy you will see in any Zelda game. I think Psylocke could be interesting to be brought back into a Zelda game, and maybe it could be part of a water themed or sky themed Zelda dungeon, or 3D Zelda dungeon, that is. And because water, because it's this giant octopus, and octopuses normally live in water, or it could be in a sky temple because it's using this cyclone to hover about in the air. So one of the two things. And I think similar to Manhandler, it could get a bit of an update-ish. So we could, because some of his attacks is that it can summon other cyclones and stuff like that, and it can also just go from the sky to the ground and just sort of do a tackling charge towards you. And maybe it could do something like it could summon other Octoroks on the ground to like similar to Moldorm, to try and create chaos. And in terms of like you're distracted on like what should you do, defeat the Octoroks first or wait until Psylocke makes an attack and stuff like that. So yeah, I could see Psylocke just having some of its powers it can use in Phantom Hourglass, but probably use new attacks and stuff like that in a future Zelda game if it does appear in a future game. So yeah, for number 2 is the Helmasaur King. Now, this boss, I feel like it feels like a boss that should definitely be in a 3D Zelda game, and I feel like it could possibly translate well in a future 3D game, similar to how like if you look at bosses like Goma and King Dodongo, I think with their appearances in a lot of this, or in several Zelda games, or in the 3D games, I think they have been translated really well. I think Goma more especially because with Goma, I do like how Goma is treated, and in terms of like its designs, because in the first game that Goma appears in, she's basically like this giant sort of crab spider boss, but then in Ocarina of Time, she's more of a spider thing, but she doesn't look too much like a spider. But then with Armor Goma in Twilight Princess, she's much more of a giant spider with a giant eye on the top of its head, and that can fire laser beams. And I feel like with the Helmasaur King, it could go. I think it could go really well in a 3D Zelda game, and I feel like it could try and like have some new abilities, or maybe one of its abilities from either the games that it appeared in, like in A Link Between Worlds or A Link to the Past, or a combination of the two, because in A Link to the Past, it can use its tail to like stretch out and hit Link, and in A Link Between Worlds, it can make the whole boss room dark, and it can do this supercharge towards you. So it could be a combination of that, and also you could try and do a combination of attacks. mainly to its not a skull, its crown mask thing, because in both A Link Between Worlds and A Link to the Past, you have to use the hammer, but maybe you could try and use like not only the hammer, but maybe also bomb arrows or something like that. So like it could give it a new fresh of paint or fresh coat of paint and a new way of experiencing the boss and stuff like that. So yeah. And for number one is Fraz. Now, Fraz is one of those bosses that's one of those unique bosses that you don't see in many Zelda games, and that being it's a boss that can split itself into multiple bodies. And another boss that's kind of similar is the first boss in Phantom Hourglass. I don't 100% remember the name of that particular boss at the moment, but I do know it can split itself up into 3 or 4 smaller bodies, and you need to use the boomerang to combine them all together to make the main body of the boss. So yeah, so with Fraz, he also had the power of ice and fire, and I feel like he does work well in not Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and I think his boss design and the way you have to fight him is really well done, because he's basically this the main body is like this weird goblin bat looking thing, and then when his body is split into two, it's these 2 smaller bat goblin things, and one shoots fire, the other shoots ice. And yeah, I think if he is brought into a 3D game, I think he'll work well, because you have to like use your environment around you, especially if he's like if you put him into like Hyrule Field from Breath of the Wild into the Kingdom, you could really try and use his fire attack to make an updraft and hit him with either ice or fire arrows, depending on which form he's in. Because I think if he is brought into a 3D game, he could try and like switch or change bodies at the fly. So 1 minute he's using ice attacks, so he's in his ice body. So like, for example, like when he is using one of his attacks in the game or in Spirit Tracks, he changes design and his attack patterns change. For example, in his ice form, he just swells up like a giant balloon and just fires just one massive ice blast. But in his fire form, he basically just spews out fire. So I feel like in a 3D game that will make a unique and I would say challenging boss, because it's really much of like switching his body on the fly in terms of using either ice or fire, but also having to think up of different ways to try and fight him, like either using fire-based weapons or ice-based weapons, or using either fire or ice arrows depending on the situation. So yeah, that's been my top 5 2D bosses that could appear in a 3D Zelda game. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and see you in the next video.